STEMology, the Young Scientist Survival Guide, Session 34. Welcome, STEMologists. So we're excited to discuss this week's topics with you. So glad you've returned to continue the PreMed Prep series with the 6th episode out of 7. We are so excited to discuss this week's topics with you. But first, let me introduce my special guests. I am here with Emma Helm, of course, and Dr. Tammy Welchert for this week's episode 6 topics. So hi, Emma. Hi, Dr. Welchert. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Pretty good, yeah.
Good. So Emma, we've had you on, this whole series, but Dr. Welchert, since this is technically your third time, but the first time in this series, do you want to introduce yourself for everybody?
Sure. So I currently serve as UMKC's Director for Academic Advising, but I am probably here because I have experience serving on an admissions committee for the UMKC School of Dentistry previously. Just hung that hat up. And then also I've been involved my entire career at UMKC, so for the past 21 years, with advising students who are interested in going into a variety of health professions. And I've got leadership experience with the Central and National Association of Advisors for the Health Professions. So hopefully I'm bringing some good information to you.
I think so. I mean, you taught Emma and I. Yeah. Most of everything we know.
I think we turned out okay.
Exactly.
And here we are. So I think that will all work out perfect. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and giving us all of your experience. So
You're welcome.
Yeah, let's just get started then. So this week's topics we are going to talk about are quite heavy, but extremely important. So starting a new personal statement is always tough. Hopefully with these tips from Emma, Dr. Welchert, and I, we'll be able to help you feel at least a little more comfortable getting started. And the second topic we're going to discuss is interview prep. So this is the one topic so far that Emma and I have very little experience with. So I'm really glad that Dr. Welchert's here to kind of fill in the blanks and help us out. So before we get started, I do want to say that I appreciate you all tuning into this episode. You have made it to the 6th episode in the series, and we only have one left, so I'm very proud of you for taking control of the situation and learning as much as possible about these topics so that you can be as successful as possible. First thing that we're going to talk about, as I said before, is personal statement writing. What are the steps that you do prior to writing a personal statement? What goes into that?
Well, what do you do before you start writing any statement? What did you guys do when you were starting to write papers for a class?
Yeah, I guess you have an outline, you kind of brainstorm a bit.
Exactly. So I think for students just to sit down and take some time to think about what their experiences are. What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your motivation? Why do you want to be a doctor? I think that's something that a lot of students don't take time to practice and really think about how to verbalize why I want to be a doctor. Yeah. But thinking about the activities and the experiences that you've had that have kind of confirmed that fit for you. Thinking about all of the information that you're going to put into your application. What are kind of the 3 or 4 most important things that you want an admissions committee to know about you, and really focusing on what those ideas are and how you can demonstrate those, especially if you're talking about a characteristic or a skill that you have or something that you've learned.
So it's definitely not a point A to point B process, is it? No, I remember writing, I think, maybe 10 different ideas that I thought were the most important before I decided on, I think, 3 ultimately.
And I think that's part of the process, right? Is you have to decide what's most important for you. But then as you're writing, it's really about making sure that message is coming across. So, Lena, if you write a personal statement and you send it to me in a draft and say, hey, Dr. Welchert, can you look at this? One of the things that I'm going to do is when I send that back to you with maybe some edits and ideas is say, here are the top 3 things that I took away from that statement. Is that what you wanted me to get out of it? And if it's not, then that's an opportunity for you to go back and do some more writing, because we want to make sure that the message is being received that you intended to send.
That's a great idea. I remember when I was thinking of topics for my personal statement, I had to do a lot of introspection and see what was really important to me in this career path and why I wanted to be a doctor. And I don't think I was really ready for that journey yet, because the only things that I could really think of is I want to help people. I want to be there for people. I want to go with them throughout their health journeys. And I feel like that's very obvious for someone who wants to be a doctor. So you have to dig even deeper.
Absolutely. That's the question I throw back is, when I ask students, why do you want to be a doctor? Well, I want to help people. Well, who's one of the most helpful people to me in my life? My plumber. Tell me why is medicine the right path for you to be helping people? Why don't you become a plumber? Because I love my plumber when
that's true.
When things back up.
And yeah, that's probably a whole other story, but
that's a really good response.
I mean, yeah, if you really think about it, there's so many ways to help people. So being like super specific about why you and why this position, why this avenue.
Medicine. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So kind of branching off of that, I know it's important to stay professional, just as your goal is to become a medical professional, so your personal statement should reflect that, but how do you also keep it personal?
That's a good point. I think that's something that students have to be mindful of. And I send comments back a lot of times to students going, I don't know who wrote this, but this isn't the you that I know. And so it's that responsibility, I think, to be true to yourself and not to write what you think an admissions committee wants to read. I think there are some things that play into that. How you explain situations, how you explain what you've taken away from the activities that you've presented. I think how you start your statement says a lot about you, and that's one of the tips that I'll throw out there is, probably better than 95% of all personal statements start with, I want to be a doctor because my grandmother got sick, or my sister was in a car accident, or something like that. And I think finding that opening statement that sets you apart, but really grabs the attention of the people who are reading it and makes them want to read all the way through.
So one of my best friends is a film major, and his thing is directing. So having a story from beginning to end where the whole time your attention's grabbed and everyone knows exactly what's going on. So I actually took some tips from him on how to write an actual story. The hard part, of course, was the filling, and what made me stand out and what made it personal to me. But finding your voice and that tone and personality is critical to any good story.
Yeah. Having a thread that kind of weaves everything together. I will be the first to admit that I am a huge advocate for the 5-paragraph personal statement.
I am
You
too.
have an introduction. I tell students, what are the 3 most important things that you want that admissions committee to know? So introduction, important thing 1, important thing 2, important thing 3. Give me a conclusion that wraps it all back together. But if you can have a story, like I don't remember now who it was, but one of the neatest personal statements that I read last year, in fact, was about a student who had cut his arm on a piece of glass. And his story was about the stitches that stitched together this journey for him. And it was just really good. But I've read ones about students who were worked with small children who had disabilities, and they were working with horse therapy. And so it was about the pieces that she uses in therapy and how that kind of wove her story together. But there's some really creative ways to do that. And I say that with just a little bit of caution, because I'm not sure that your personal statement, it isn't about writing this colorful, magnificent story, right? This is about your opportunity to point out the things that maybe are in your full application, but that there was something that a little gold nugget that you took away from that really helps to set you apart from all the other candidates, but clearly demonstrates your path to medicine, how you've confirmed that fit, and what you hope to contribute as a practicing professional. Because getting into medical school isn't the end goal. There's so much beyond that.
Yeah. I have heard at one point there was an an individual who's giving advice that maybe you should drop in somewhere your 5-year plan after medical school and where you see yourself going, because I feel like there is kind of almost a wall there. Like, just getting through the door is the ultimate step, and they kind of, once you get through that door, it's like, okay, and like, now I'm actually going to be a doctor. What's next? So
I think that's a perfect place for the conclusion. Is I'm not sure that I would advocate for laying out a 5-year plan, but some big ideas about what you're hoping to contribute through a career in medicine.
So I'm sure that there are a lot of misconceptions and things that are misinterpreted as you go through this writing process. So what do you think are some of the biggest misunderstandings by applicants as they write their personal statements?
I think common misunderstandings maybe are repeating information that may be a part of their application. You need to think of that personal statement as prime real estate, so we don't want to waste it on things that may be located in other places in the application. I think this is an opportunity for admissions committees to get an idea about how your mind works, about what things that you have made determinations about the importance or the priority, or why something that you've witnessed is important to your vision of yourself or your growth. I think that sometimes students can get caught up writing about some personal experience of another person, or talking too much about when they were shadowing what the physician did, and they forget that this personal statement is about them.
Yeah,
I can understand that, being in a car accident was a terrible tragedy and there was probably some suffering and pain that was involved. I don't want to know about that person. I want to know about you. As an admissions committee person, I need to know about you and about how you see things and how you value things and what you're hoping to contribute, and what how your motivation has been demonstrated through your experiences. So I think sometimes they forget that this is about them, and that's something that I make a lot of comments on, is about, you've spent 3/4 of your personal statement talking about other people. I only got these few sentences, so we need can we rewrite this in a different way that highlights you?
So since we're talking about experiences, I know that a lot of people have different points in their life at which they begin to consider medicine. So disregarding those, is it important to use more current experiences? Can we throw in high school experiences? What should really be included in this personal statement?
So I think that varies from applicant to applicant. As you mentioned, everybody starts on that timeline differently. Some students may have parents or family members who are physicians, so they got very early exposure to the profession. Some may have never considered it before, but maybe as they went into high school, they had a health-related program that they could be involved with. Others maybe didn't consider it until they got involved and met you or Elena at UMKC, and you were like, oh, I'm so excited about being pre-med, and they're like, I never even considered that. Some of it is, maybe I never saw myself in that role before. I never considered that was even a possibility for me. So with regards to timing of things that you include in your personal statement, if there is an event or an activity that happened early in your life that really started you on that path, that might be appropriate to comment on. If there was an experience that really solidified your decision to pursue that path, maybe you had been exploring, but there was something happened that really concreted that decision for you. Regardless of when that happened, that might be something to include. The personal statement is a little bit different than the application, that you have a little bit more freedom to talk about experiences over your lifetime. In the application, you really want to stay focused on things that really since you've graduated from high school.
Emma had mentioned that she had quite a few drafts. I also had a lot of drafts. Is that something that's pretty normal or expected?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So once you get your personal statement down, usually a first draft far exceeds the character limits that you're going to be given, right? So exactly. So that's an opportunity for you to, at that point, give it to someone. See if the message that you're sending is the message that's being received. Ask people, give it to people that you trust and that you know, and say, here, can you read this? Tell me what the top 3 things that you took away from this are. And if that matches hopefully it matches what you intended it to be. But then you've got to think about, how can I tighten it up? How can I be concise? How can I cut out extraneous things but still get that message across? So having multiple drafts is part of the process. You'll probably rewrite after you give it to your friends, and maybe after you give it to your mom, and after you give it to a professor. Everybody's going to have comments, and that's the other nice thing about a personal statement, is it is personal, meaning it's your statement and you have ownership of that. So when people give you feedback and make comments, you can take what you like and discard what you don't, because it's your statement and it needs to remain your statement. And that's one thing that I would caution students about, is if you're working with people and their comments are significantly changing the tone or the ideas in your personal statement, be careful about how much advice and how much change you allow someone else to make on your personal statement.
Mm-hmm. I think it helped me a lot to actually read other people's personal statements. I had a lot of friends applying to professional schools at the same time I was writing my personal statement, so we would look at each other's, tear them apart, and even without looking at the comments they left on mine, which those were helpful too, but looking at theirs and trying to take things out because they went over the character limit, I had realizations about what I could take out from mine, because reading theirs, I was like, oh, this is, from an outside point of view, this isn't super relevant to what you're doing. This seems more outside the scheme of what you want to do. But I think it was really helpful to have that outside point of view.
I think having a writing group is never a bad thing, regardless of what you're writing on.
Yeah, I remember for my personal statement, I tried to rip it apart myself, and I literally took it out sentence by sentence and cut out a piece of paper so each sentence was its own little sliver, and I just rearranged them. I tried to place them in different spots. All of this, of course, was after I had outlined it with sticky notes. That way I could, I put different ideas on sticky notes, and I just put them on the wall in different orders and said, okay, this makes sense here, but it would be more powerful here, and things like that.
Yeah. I love an outline, and so I'm kind of on board with you there with the sticky notes. I love being able to rearrange things, and an outline isn't a really easy way to do that. Just starting with those 3 big ideas and then putting a few bullet points under them, coming back and looking at it again, filling in a little bit more detail every time. And then, before long, you're going to have a pretty darn good start at a personal statement.
And I like that you said doing something, taking a break and coming back, because that was huge for me. I needed those hours, days in between to really sit with what I had wrote and see if it still holds true a few days later, or if I could do better.
Yep. One of the things that, Emma, you mentioned earlier about how do I keep it personal, one of the things that has helped me more than anything else, I think, in my writing is reading it out loud to myself. Because you catch a lot of things that you said really funny in how you wrote it. And when you read it out loud to yourself, you'll catch a lot of those things. And you'll be like, oh, that sounds weird. That's not how I would say this to someone, right? And so that's an opportunity for you to kind of catch some of those things on your own. I think there are a couple of things that students can keep in mind when they're writing their personal statements. We mentioned before that medical school is not the end, so being a little bit more forward-thinking about that, avoiding the use of elaborate metaphors, right? This isn't flowery language. We're not writing a movie script here.
That'll cut down on characters, too.
It will. Being careful about, we don't want to see you using quotes from other people or really referencing maybe movie stars or famous celebrities. This is about you, and we need that you to come through. We don't want to read boring statements. So although it's your story, there needs to be some interest factor to it. And that's where your friends and family can kind of help you to go, this is really kind of dry.
That's so funny that you say that, because my mom, when she read it, she said, Alina, what is this? This is the most boring thing I've ever read. She's like, I wanted to go to sleep halfway through, but I didn't want to be rude to you. I was like, okay, well.
Yeah, but that's important that you get that feedback, right? Yeah. Because we don't want the admissions person reading it to go to sleep either, or just to get disinterested and put it down.
It's that honesty that you need.
It is. It is.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really helpful to have multiple viewpoints, like we've been saying. like I mentioned, I had a couple mentors look over mine, and one of those was not a science professor. So do you think there's any benefit of having non-science professors, any pitfalls, anything like that?
I think there is great benefit in having a variety of people look at your personal statement, because everybody's coming to it from a different perspective. And the fact of the matter is that an admissions committee is not just doctors, right? There are students that are part of the committee. There are community members that are part of the committee that are not medical professionals. So you don't know who is going to be charged with presenting your application to the committee. So it needs to appeal to a variety of people.
I know that there are a few topics that you should definitely stay away from, and I think one of those is money. You don't want to talk about, oh, I'd love to be a doctor because I heard they make some money. You know, that's probably one topic at least that we should stay away from. Can you think of any more?
I would love it if that was your true intention of going into medicine, if you told me it was for the money, because that makes my decision much easier about whether or not to admit you.
Cut down to the chase pretty quick.
So please be honest. Other things to avoid. I think students, anything that you don't want to talk about, you should not put in your personal statement. So if you have strong views about abortion or religious things or euthanasia, really hot topics, if you're not comfortable having a conversation about that, you don't want to put it in your personal statement, because your personal statement is one of those things that is available to some members that you'll interview with. I know we're going to talk about interviews later. So you don't want to put anything in there that you're not comfortable talking about. You don't want to put anything in there that isn't true. If you tell me you have these experiences and I ask you about it, it's going to be obvious pretty quickly that you don't have a clue about what you're talking about. I think one other thing that students may have some confusion or want to know about is what I call confronting glaring problems. And so if you have, maybe you had a semester that you didn't do very well, you had been doing well, and then we see a big drop off, or you had, maybe there's a reason that happened. So you don't want to spend your whole personal statement on that, but if it's something that is one of those glaring problems, it's okay for you to address it, to say, this is what happened, this is what I learned from it, this is how I grew from it, I'm stronger because of it, that type of thing. If there's an academic action, if you've got some criminal history that needs to be addressed, you got a minor in possession maybe, something like that. Again, it's about owning your decisions. It's, I made this decision, I knew it was wrong, this is what I learned from it. One thing I'll tell you that is a big no-no is it wasn't someone's fault. You decided to do that. No one had a gun to your head making you do it, whatever it was. It wasn't your professor's fault. It wasn't your friend's fault. You made the decision. So you've got to be accountable for the decisions that you make. And that's, there's a lot of grace and forgiveness. We're all human. We've all made mistakes. We've all learned from things. We've all experienced difficulty. So, maybe your parents got divorced and that really was hard on you, and we saw a drop in your grades. You can talk about those things. We don't want that to be the entire focus of your personal statement.
Yeah, just I understand this is a red flag in my application. Here's a quick explanation for you. We can talk more about it later.
Exactly.
Awesome. One of the last points is how to structure your personal statement. You mentioned that you do appreciate the 5-paragraph structure, which I assume would be your introduction, 3 body points, at a conclusion.
Yes.
Can you expand a little bit on that?
Again, we mentioned that your personal statement is prime real estate. So you have a limited number of characters that you can use. Spaces are included. That's in the instructions.
Terrible. Yes.
I know. It's high stakes to get that everything you want to say in that limited amount of space. So I think that the 5-paragraph format, students don't have to be married to that. If you need to make another paragraph, you should feel free to do that. But I think, again, staying focused on that idea about what are the big 3 main points. And if there's 4 points, that's great. But what are the big points that you're trying to get across to the admissions committee? What do you want them to know? What's going to set you apart from other applicants? You've always got to, everything about the application process needs to be strategic.
So it sounds like confidence is a major component.
Confidence is important. If there is anything in your personal statement that doesn't give the admissions committee confidence to choose you, you need to rewrite it.
So once you get through your personal statement, your applications, preparing for everything like that, you also have to look forward to interviews. So, Dr. Welcher, I know that a lot of people really think about how they should present themselves for interviews, and one of the most important things, the first impressions, how do you dress?
It's a big deal that you are presenting yourself as the professional that you're there to be, right? So when we think of professional attire, it is a suit. It is a tie for males. It is, either slacks or a skirt, pantsuit, dress suit.
So when I was looking at getting my headshots taken, I looked at a few websites for what would be the best thing to wear. And a lot of those websites said to wear a plain colored shirt underneath my suit. So is that kind of a golden rule? Is it okay to wear patterns as long as they're minimalistic, or what's the ticket there?
So I think I may be a little bit on the more liberal side of this issue, because I've had students say, I've got this great suit, but it's like a brighter blue color. It's not navy, it's not black, it's not gray. And I'm like, if that's you, be you. Yeah. Own you. Yeah. I want to see you, not the you that you want, that you think I'm expecting to see. So I think little things like that allow you to express your personality and the way that you're dressing are fine. You don't want to be over the top. I want you to be you.
Okay, so we've got the outfit put together. Now we're ready for the interview. Do you have any suggestions on how to practice?
Sure. So I think that students need to understand that you are here to interview, for me, number one, just to see if I can have a conversation with you. Can you just relate to me as another human being, right? Because in the back of my mind, I'm going, how comfortable would I be with you as my doctor, or you as my children's doctor, or any of my family members' doctor? And if you can't even talk to me, how am I going to be comfortable with you as that doctor? Right? So it really just is about, can you have a conversation with me? So I think practicing having conversations with people, even if it's just you getting together with your friends and you guys, asking each other questions, just that practice of talking to one another. And there are some things that there are clear right and wrongs on, but when we're in an interview, I'm really asking you about your opinion. I'm wanting to know how you think. So if I throw something out that you weren't expecting, so Emma, tell me what you think about the bird flu, or tell me what you think about the COVID pandemic. You might say, I might ask you something a little bit more specific. Tell me what you think about, whether or not you think a vaccine will be ready at the end of the year or something like that. And so it really is about you demonstrating to me how you think. It's like, well, here's what I think. And if you don't know a lot about it, it's okay to say, I don't know a lot about that. But from what I've read, from what I've seen on the news, I think these are some important points that I would want to keep in mind. These might be some resources that I could use to find out a little bit more about that. I think as a health profession, these might be some aspects of that would be concerning for me, or that I would be supportive of. So I'm just, can you logically walk me through your thinking patterns?
Wow. Something I found really helpful, and I don't know if it would be helpful for everybody, but I like to think about things while I'm doing them or while somebody else is experiencing, in terms of how I would react. So anytime something that could be considered an ethical issue happens to my friends or to me, I like to just kind of ponder about what I would do if I was a physician in this situation, or just in general. If it's something happening to someone else, what would I do if it was me?
Be empathetic in that way.
Yeah.
Well, and thinking about it, you mentioned, how do I think I would handle this as a physician? But, how might I handle this if this was my friend? What advice would I give them? Are there places that I could go to ask for assistance? One of the things that we look for in an interview, one of the things that, again, in the back of our mind that we're kind of holding back there is, are you a person who will ask for help when you need help? Will you direct your friends to appropriate resources, or will you try and solve the problem all on your own, even when you have no expertise in that area? Your answers are very revealing about a lot of different aspects, much more than just the question that's being asked.
I've found that YouTube videos or maybe a career center person would be very helpful too.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people that can help you thinking about how to prepare for an interview and that you can practice interviews with. Your faculty, your advisor, you mentioned the Career Services Center. They are specifically trained to help students with interviews. They have videos. They can record you doing a mock interview and watch it back with you so you can catch your leg jiggling through the whole interview, or you playing with your hair or your earring or whatever, those little, fidgets that you do. If you say a lot, if you say like a lot, they'll be able to catch those things for you too. I think it's important for students to understand that preparation depends on the interview for that program. And there's several different interview formats, and we haven't talked about that. So a traditional interview is still the most common interview for students to participate in, and that's either where you're going to have a one-on-one interview with someone, or maybe it will be a panel of people that you'll be interviewing with, or there will be maybe one person or a panel interviewing with you and several other students at the same time, or just with you. It can be an open interview, meaning that the person that you're interviewing with has full access to your application. So that would include your letters of recommendation, your test scores, your personal statement. It could be a closed interview, meaning that that person that's interviewing you may have no information about you. They may only have your letters of recommendation and your personal statement. It can be a mini multiple interview. That's gaining popularity with medical schools and different health professional schools. And a mini multiple interview is a very different experience for students. So that's where you've got back-to-back interviews that are happening very quickly. So you'll maybe, usually you're set up, the interviews are set up in some type of a station format. You'll go, either you'll be given a folder, or maybe there'll be a piece of paper taped on a door. You'll have 2 minutes to read that, and then you step into the room or you step into the interview station, and you have maybe 6 or 8 minutes to conduct the interview. And then time is called, you go to the next prep station, you read the next scenario, and then 2 minutes later you go into the next interview station. And that can last for an hour and a half, depending on how many, you might go through 10 or 12 stations all in a row before you complete that. So it's high stakes. It feels like high pressure. Students get very nervous when they do that, but I think it's important for students to know that it's a unique opportunity, because every individual interview station you get a separate score for. So if you don't do well on one, it doesn't ruin the whole interview, right? How many times have you guys heard from friends, I totally blew that interview, whether it was a job interview or a medical school interview? If you do poorly, if you leave a bad impression in a 20-minute interview versus you do 1 6-minute interview that you didn't do very well, but then you were able to do well in the other 8 or 9, then your score is going to be reflective of that. And each interview station is measuring different characteristics that are important for the medical school. So we talked about that before, those core competencies, your ability to communicate, your ability to be ethical, to thinking about your support system and how you would provide support to other people. All of those things are measured.
I did notice that my heart rate kind of picked up when you said multiple mini interviews. I was like, I just got really nervous.
It is intense.
How do you think you know when you've gotten to the point that you are ready and now you are 100% professionally prepared to go throughout your interviews?
Do you think that's possible? Do you think
Nope.
people...
That was a trick question.
Yeah.
Are you ever ready?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Are you ever ready? I think you're as ready as you prepare to be ready.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone ever goes into an interview feeling 100% confident. And I think, again, just reminding yourself that this is first and foremost about, can I have a conversation with you? And that should help to kind of tone down a little bit of that this isn't, I'm not looking for a right answer. I'm looking to see, can you logically present your answer, and can we have a conversation?
That's excellent. Any advice for students as they're going through one of the final steps in their pre-med journey?
Sure. Don't give up. Don't give up. I know that going through this process really creates a lot of emotion and a lot of second guessing. And don't give up. You have worked so hard to be here, to reach this point. Follow through. Know that everything that you've done has brought you to this point, and you just have to finish it. And I know that finishing that application is going to seem like a huge feat, but break it down into chunks. You've got the application service isn't going to open until May, so you've got plenty of time, more than enough time, but then just, breaking it into little pieces, do a little bit at a time, even if it's just, I'm going to set 15 minutes aside today to pick up that outline and read through it and jot a couple of more things down that I need to think about, but don't give up.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the worst things you can do is try to rush that process. So like Dr. Welchert said, even if you're just taking 15 minutes a day, get it done. Don't stress yourself out, but don't give up.
Yep, don't give up. I tell students, that positive self-talk is huge. Take a marker on your bathroom mirror and write, "Good morning, doctor," whatever your last name is, so that every day,
got chills.
I know, every day you get up and you see that. Own that role.
That's great. That is all that we have for today. Thanks for stopping in to listen to our 6th episode of the PreMed Prep series. So there's one more that we are going to release within 2 weeks of this episode, and that one's going to be pretty packed full of information as well, so you do not want to miss it. In the next episode of Stemology, there will be a very interesting discussion. Cole Marvin, a longtime friend of mine from Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, will join me. In this episode, the topic of discussion will be imposter syndrome. So there have been quite a few times where some of us doubt our skills or experiences and wonder if we even deserve our achievements. So Cole and I will explore this phenomenon and what it means and how to combat it. Share and subscribe to support the Stemology podcast, and I would love to hear from you as well. So comment below your thoughts about personal statement writing and the process that you might go through to write it. Thank you for listening to our 34th episode of Stemology, a Young Scientist Survival Guide. Tune in with me, Alina Adams, for episode 35, Imposter Syndrome, with Cole Marvin. See you next time.